Welcome, my name is Fabian, and in the following I'm going to talk about how you can build security requirements into the logical design. It's really important during the conceptual phase to early identify certain security requirements because they really have an impact and make designs, architectures, logical designs much more complex in the end. So for example, we have identified during the assessment phase, during the conceptual design phase, that specific users should be able to access the virtual desktop or the virtual application without the usage of a VPN. So it should be easy for the end user to access the environment without the usage of a VPN, but still that must be a secure connectivity. What we can do is we can utilize the VMware Unified Access Gateway to offer this secure access over an unsecure network. What does it mean? We place normally 2 unified access gateways in the DMZ and interact with the connection servers in the backend, create connectivity between the UAGs and the connection server, between the UAGs and the virtual desktops to make sure we have a secure access over those hardened Linux appliances. Another requirement that we often see is that different security policies, different applications, desktops should be accessed based or dependent on if we have an internal or external access. What does it mean? Do I come from the internal LAN of my enterprise? I'm allowed to access all applications, all virtual desktops. That's where I'm probably allowed to use all kind of data exchange mechanism. But do I come from an unsecure network over the internet? I'm probably not allowed to see all of the desktops in our environment. How can we achieve such a solution? We can make use of the horizon pool tagging mechanism. So we can tag certain pools and say, okay, only if you come from a connection server that has a certain tag, you're allowed to access this pool, which helps us to fulfill certain security considerations, certain security requirements. Another very typical security requirement is that we will require a second factor authentication in case we connect over an unsecure network. What does it mean? We need to access any kind of second factor, a token information, any kind of other information into the system before we can enter our virtual desktop. So what can we use? We can use the Unified Access Gateway and integrate it via Radius, via RSA Security, via SAML with any kind of other third-party authentication mechanism and therefore secure our access in a proper way. Another very modern and very common requirement nowadays is that we don't want to allow access to our virtual desktop, virtual applications in case our endpoint is not really compliant to a certain scenario. If our endpoint doesn't have the latest antivirus applied, if our endpoint is not managed by our company, we probably don't want to give any kind of access to sensitive data. And that's where we can utilize the Workspace ONE Identity Manager to check for a full compliance before we allow this conditional access to certain applications or virtual desktops. From a logical design, we already talked about that we can use the tagging mechanism to allow external or to differentiate between external available pools and internal available pools. So what we can do is we can define tags on the connection server side. We can define tags on the pool level and say, okay, only desktop pools with the internal tag are allowed to be accessed by connection servers that have this internal tag. So users from a corporate LAN access the connection servers that they have the internal tag and can therefore only access the internal desktops. The same thing counts for connection servers having an external tag and desktop pools with non-sensitive data that have an external tag, so that users coming from the internet coming to this connection servers are only eligible to access those external tagged virtual desktops. Important, and why do we need to take care about that within the logical design already? Since that kind of limits or that kind of reduces the number of connection servers we have in total for our building block, for our pod environment, we need to take care about it, because if we have 2 connection servers for internal connections, up to 4,000 sessions, 2 connection servers for external sessions, also utilizing those 4,000 sessions, we could only add another connection server to get to the maximum number of 10,000 sessions, and are maybe only able to give 6,000 internal users access to the internal pools, since we already reserved kind of 4,000 sessions on a connection server for the external pools. So those are things that we need to consider right at this phase of our design. The Unified Access Gateway is really our secure gateway to access virtual desktops, applications, and for sure nowadays it's also integrated with functionality of Workspace ONE, Unified Endpoint Management, AirWatch. So we can use the Unified Access Gateway to allow access to services within our secured internal network. So typically what we have is we have multiple Unified Access Gateways in the DMZ. At the customer's environment, protected by a front-end firewall, protected by a back-end firewall, and we need connectivity from them to our connection servers or to a load balancer that is in front of our connection servers. Besides that, it's important that the UAGs need access also or network connectivity to the virtual desktop and virtual application itself. A more specified definition will be talked about in the physical design section, but that is really important to understand, since we now need to make sure that we can place virtual appliances, the UAG, in the DMZ as the customer side. And that is really important because it really depends. If we only are allowed to use physical servers in the DMZ, we cannot use our virtual appliances. We have figured out that as a constraint during the assessment phase, that we need a vSphere platform in the DMZ to deploy virtual UAG appliances. So if we have figured out that we're not allowed to deploy virtual appliances in the DMZ, that's a constraint. So we need to figure out how we can deal with this constraint. One alternative, we deploy on physical servers the Windows Security Server. Or another alternative, we get the permission to deploy vSphere ESXi within the DMZ and then deploy our virtual appliances on top of that. That's something we need to clarify upfront already in the logical design phase. So the UAG is a hardened Linux-based virtual appliance, and it supports multiple authentication methods. So we can add a second factor authentication into the solutions. So we do not just use Active Directory credentials, we can also use RSA Security, any kind of radius-compatible component. We can integrate smart cards or any kind of SAML-based authentication method with our Unified Access Gateway. Another important fact is that we probably want to create something like conditional-based access into our environment. What does it mean? Only if our endpoint, our physical desktop, our physical laptop, our smartphone has a certain condition, we allow access into our virtual desktop, virtual application, SaaS-based application. And that's where we can utilize the identity manager of Workspace ONE. So once we have the identity manager in place, we can integrate it with other solutions, with integrated solutions that check for the compliance of a certain device, check the compliance with some kind of AirWatch characteristics, mobile device characteristics. And once the device has been declared as compliant, we allow access to certain applications, to certain desktops. And that's how we can utilize Identity Manager. That's how we can utilize the whole Workspace ONE suite within our solution. Again, depending on the security requirements, we might need to consider to build Workspace ONE or components of Workspace ONE into our VDI solution as well.